Welcome back to the channel, everybody. So we are back with probably one of the most requested videos I've had for a long time on this channel, and that is to compare the two main Army Special Operations units, which is Army Special Forces, Green Berets, which I myself was, and Army Rangers. All right. Now, if you're expecting a mudslinging, shit-talking video, that's not what this video is gonna be. All right. If you've watched any of my comparison videos where I sort of rack and stack and rank different special operations units in different things, Army Rangers have usually been near the top, 1 through 3, in a lot of the different things that I've done. Okay, so I personally have a ton of respect for Ranger Battalion, Rangers, and for those who didn't know, there's a hefty portion of guys in Army Special Forces that were prior Rangers. So we have a big part of our unit brings over experience and knowledge and all of that from Ranger Battalion. So they've been a big benefit to Army Special Forces as well. To do this, we have to look at a bunch of different metrics, right? If we're going to talk about who's better, the things we're going to look at is the selection and Q course processes, our mission sets, how we actually operate, global war on terror successes, and then sort of who's better at the end. And then at the very end, because one of the main questions I really get asked from a lot of young dudes is like, which special operations unit would be better to join? Rangers, Green Berets. That's like the most common question I get. So we're going to talk about which one I suggest at the end. Okay. Now, I'm going to have a couple clips from Nick Irvin, who's prior Ranger, does a lot of stuff in social media space, for some perspective from the Ranger side, and then we're going to talk about these different things. All right, so let's actually jump into it. And the first thing, like I said, we need to talk about is the start. Okay, how do you actually start your career? How do you become a Ranger? How do you become a Green Beret? Which process is more difficult? Okay, what's the training actually look like? All right, and then we're going to compare those, talk a little bit about it before we move into our mission sets and how we actually operate. Okay, so first thing I'm going to do is show the clip right here of Nick Irvin talking about Ranger selection. Now he's comparing it to Navy SEAL selection, but still it's a good way to get an idea about what it's like. All right, let's check it out.
The Navy SEALs in the Hell Week, and they're up for a full week or 5 straight days, and it's just torture on every single level. What's the equivalent in the Army Rangers?
Selection. Like, we don't have a Hell Week where it's 5 days of just being up doing physical activities without sleep. And I don't even think they go the entire 5 days. I think it's like 3 days and some change. But they get weekends off. Like, we didn't have weekends off. Our days it was just all one long day. So I would say selection for us was pretty brutal.
All right, so this part of the interview is kind of silly to watch. All right, for those of you who don't know, and we're going to put it up on the screen, comparing Ranger selection difficulty-wise to Navy SEAL selection is a really tough ask, a really tough hill to climb to try to do the mental gymnastics to justify that. Guys, Navy SEAL selection is infinitely harder than Ranger selection. We're going to talk about why, just in reality, okay? Now, and also nowhere near as hard as Army Special Forces selection. The biggest reason why, not that it's physically less challenging or that it's mentally discipline, mentally toughness less challenging, that's not the point. It's just duration, okay? So put it up on the screen and we'll see, here's the difference, okay? And again, this is strictly what you have to accomplish to don your either tan beret, green beret, become an Army Ranger, become a Green Beret. When I've talked about this before, a lot of people trying to play mental gymnastics about Ranger Battalion that, oh, well, actually, once you get to Ranger Battalion, you're constantly still being assessed and you got to go through more training. Every Special Forces, Special Operations unit's like that. When you get to an ODA, you constantly got to go to schools. You need more training, okay? And I've heard, well, you still have to go to Ranger School to have made it in Army Rangers. Yeah, most Green Berets go to Ranger School too. Okay, so this is strictly what is required to become an Army Ranger, become a Green Beret. So no mental gymnastics. We're not going to play that game. So again, here's the difference, right? RASP, Ranger Selection, 8 weeks long. Okay, now it is a ball kicker, absolute physical destroyer. No doubt, super physically and mentally challenging. Okay, the whole course is designed to weed out the weak and make you sick. So no, it is not easy by any means, right? So he talks about there how comparing it to Navy SEALs Hell Week, right? Well, their Hell Week's only 3 days long. It's three to 4 days of another 6 months of selection. Okay, so that's sort of disingenuous the way he portrayed that. So you guys know, and don't typically talk up the Navy SEALs as a unit, but when it comes to difficulty of selection process, in my opinion, it's probably by far the hardest one, but harder than Army Special Forces selection or any of those. Okay, so again, 8 weeks long, ball kicker, smoker, yeah, but that's also the same. You're going to get the same thing in Army Special Forces qualification course. We'll talk about in a second. Navy SEALs, MARSOC, everybody deals with that same thing. It's part of the process. Okay, land navigation, getting smoked all the time, rucking, running, like physical events, PT tests. It's the same everywhere. There's only 8 weeks long. Okay, now Special Forces, as you can see, all right, and there's some little caveats here and there, but if you were to start from, a young dude fresh off the street, much like a RASP contract, a option 40 contract, okay, same thing. You're going to have 4 weeks at Special Operations Preparation Conditioning. You're going to go Special Forces Assessment and Selection. That's our actual 3 weeks in hell selection process. Right now, after that, you're going to go to Squad Unit Tactics Prep. Okay, Squad Unit Tactics, we'll talk about in a second, is basically our Ranger school that we have to go on our qualification course, which is another 6 weeks. We got to go to SEER school. In fairness, Rangers will have to go to SEER school as well. All Special Operations soldiers have to, so you could potentially add another 4 weeks there. Our MOS training, okay? So for us, we have very advanced technical skills as Green Berets, all right? We can be medics, communicators, engineers, weapons sergeants, all right? So that's another added 4 months just for our MOS schooling. Very, very challenging. These are more book smart type of challenging. Unless you're 18 Bravos, it's weapons and things like that. But again, very difficult. Then Robin Sage, which is our COLEX event, where we basically put all of the things we've learned to the test in a big unconventional warfare exercise. All right, and then on top of that, at the end, you have 6 months of language school. Every Green Beret has to learn a foreign language. All right, you're looking at, and this is bare minimum, and I'm talking about just specifically days in each phase. You add them up, you're looking at 65 weeks. In reality, there's multiple weeks usually in between each phase, right? That you're sitting around, you're getting smoked, you're doing PT events. And this is if you don't get hurt, if you don't recycle, anything like that. You break a foot, you're looking at another, adding 2-3 months to this, right? You recycle a class, you got to do SUT again, another 6 weeks. So again, the fastest usually any Green Beret is going to make it through the course and graduate is about 18 months. Now, if you're an 18 Delta, you add another year onto that in medical training, you're looking at upwards of almost 3 years of selection qualification course time, okay? We cannot compare, I'm sorry, again, this is not a mudslinging video, but when it comes to the actual Q course and selection processes, we cannot compare Army Rangers and Green Berets. There is no comparison. 8 weeks to 2 to 3 years, it is what it is, okay? But that does not mean that Rangers potentially aren't better at Green Berets at a lot of things, and we're going to get into that. So next, what we need to talk about is, now that we understand the qualification courses, let's talk about the mission sets, because this is actually, I think, one of the most important things to sort of use to delineate between the two. Now, there is some crossover, especially in the global war on terror, okay? We were all, for the most part, Green Berets, Navy SEALs, Army Rangers, Delta Force. Everybody was sort of, besides, I guess, Delta is their job. We were used all for direct action, okay? And that's not necessarily the primary mission set for a lot of us. Navy SEALs should be doing water operations. Green Berets should be focused on things like unconventional warfare, okay? But I'll put it up on the screen here so we can see the actual doctrine-based mission sets for each unit. And that way we have an idea of what each one does, okay? And we're going to talk about how, this video might end up being a little bit longer just to give you guys information. We're going to talk about how each unit does each thing, okay? Because Rangers doing direct action and Special Forces doing direct action is not the same operationally on the ground. It doesn't look the same, okay? So, but important to kind of understand the differences if we're going to say who's better at what. Now, let's jump into first one, okay? Direct action. So, this is, yes, direct action is going out with, bringing the fight, engaging the enemy, okay? Whether it be raiding compounds, any company clearing operations, like there's all sorts of different direct action, but it's actually going out and engaging in combat. You can think of it that way, all right? So, Special Forces, how do we do it? Very different than everybody else, okay? For those of you who don't know, the way Green Berets actually operate, there's 12 of us on a team. We work by, with, and through a foreign nation's military, okay? So our job is to go in, train a foreign nation's force how to fight, and then take them out and fight alongside them, lead them in combat, okay? That is much different than how Ranger Battalion is going to operate, okay? So we go out with 12 guys and let's say 60 Afghan Special Forces guys, and we go out and conduct direct action against the enemy, all right? Ranger Battalion's not going to do that. They're going to go out as more of a light infantry or advanced infantry type of unit that is going to work unilaterally, as in primarily also Army or Army military, as they go out and conduct combat in, anywhere from a company-size element or however they want to do it, okay? So way more American troops on the ground to conduct that operation, okay? Because, again, you're not using... Ranger Battalion's not using 60, Afghans to lead to go out and fight, right? That's not how they operate. Green Berets are the only ones that do that way. Now, we'll talk about who's better at it once we get to that section, because obviously there is some differences. Special reconnaissance, okay? This is going out and gathering intelligence. It's going to be pretty much the same process for most units, okay? Like the Air Force has special recon, Army has special recon. A lot of units do special recon, okay? So let's not get too worried about that. It's going out, gathering intelligence, not getting caught. Counterterrorism, okay? So this is actually going to be another one that we both do, but we do in different ways, all right? So, and then you'll see next for Green Berets, counterinsurgency. A lot of people don't know the difference between what counterterrorism and counterinsurgency is. They kind of think they're the same thing. Just real quick for the difference. Counterterrorism is dealing with sort of small individual terrorist cells, okay? So think about going when we're in southern Philippines trying to target terrorist cells comparatively to counterinsurgency. And insurgency is more of like an entire uprising within a country that's attempting to overthrow the current government. So the Taliban is a great way to think about that, right? So almost a political party, and it's wide scale. Okay, so those are the two differences in that, right? Now, so for counterterrorism, going in and basically, point target, hitting compound, right? Going in, point target raid, or Osama bin Laden going in, point target raid. Okay, that's kind of counterterrorism-esque. All right, so again, going to be different because Green Berets, we don't necessarily have the manning power to go do big raids, counterterrorism style stuff. We're going to go out, work by, with, and through the local host nation's army, right, and help them deal with counterterrorism, okay? So that's the differences in how we do that. All right, you go down, Ranger Battalion. Okay, now the next three technically SF can do. All right, so we'll talk about that. Forcible entry. So forcible entry is not like CQB kicking a door in. It's like airfield seizure, okay? So if I need to go parachute in a bunch of Rangers to take and set up an airfield to be able to bring in Air Force aircraft and things like that, that's the type of thing they're going to be doing, all right? They have that as one of their main mission sets. And they did actually do it quite a bit in Iraq, in the early days of Iraq. And yes, they're going to be very good at that. We can do it. We train it in Army Special Forces here and there because, again, if we're in an area by ourselves, like the early days in Afghanistan or Philippines or wherever, we got to be able to do it. But it's definitely not something. It's something we know how to do, but it's not easy for 12 guys to secure an airfield. We'll just say that. All right, hostage rescue. Obviously, Rangers do this. There's some famous stories about this as well. You guys can look up. But yeah, I mean, this is kind of a direct action, kind of a subset of direct action in a way. And yeah, Special Forces, as far as I know, not something that we really do any of. We don't really train. If you're going to send a unit in to do hostage rescue, you're going to say Ranger Battalion or Delta Force. I mean, that's just the reality of it. And then personnel recovery. Rangers have actually done a lot of personnel recovery, primarily in the means of recovering Navy SEALs. That's kind of interestingly enough. So, and if you're going to go, an aircraft gets shot down, a helicopter gets shot down, Black Hawk down, right? That's another famous story. Rangers are typically the ones that are going to get called in for that. Okay, SF has done that here and there, but again, with only 12 guys, it can be very difficult to pull that off. Right. So now we'll go back down the line of Green Berets. Talk about us counterinsurgency, like I mentioned. This is sort of our bread and butter is Green Berets. Why? Because we work by, with, and through. We build up a host nation's government to have the capacity and ability to deal with the insurgency. That way the American military and government doesn't have to necessarily. Foreign internal defense, kind of the same thing, right? Where you're building up a host nation's capacity to essentially have them fight for their own country. Information ops, all right, gathering intelligence, running sources, all that sort of different types of stuff. Actually, we do that in Army Special Forces, a lot of it. So we actually are able to gather and collect our own intelligence and then action our own intelligence, which not very many units can do all of those things. Security force assistance, we actually do quite a bit less of this now that the SFAB has been created, but it's technically still on our mission sets. We've got counterproliferation of weapons of mass destruction. Haven't done those since obviously the early days of Iraq, but it is one of our mission sets. Humanitarian ops, this is actually one people don't realize that Green Berets do a ton of. Right now, one of the benefits of Army Special Forces is that we're the most widely used military unit, as in we encompass the entire globe. We are everywhere at all times. Okay, that's no other American military unit does that, right? The good part of that is when there's an earthquake in Haiti or wherever, and there's all of a sudden a humanitarian crisis, most likely there's an ODA on the ground in that country that's ready to, and that many times have been the very first American soldiers or American personnel to arrive on station to provide help. Okay, so that actually is another big part of our non-war side. All right, and then the last one I have here, because it's our bread and butter, our number one, unconventional warfare, which unconventional warfare actually kind of can encompass a lot of these, right? You basically have guerrilla warfare, subversion. There's a bunch of different things that go into unconventional warfare, but it's sort of our bread and butter. The idea of being, you can send in 12 dudes behind enemy lines and, build up a resistance force, which is basically an insurgency. It's just the difference is who's the bad guys by definition. And then we can train and use, that resistance force to overthrow an evil government or whatever we're going to do. Okay, so that's unconventional warfare. We're really the only ones that do it at a large scale in the U.S. military. Okay, there. Whew. That was a lot, right? So hopefully that gives you guys an idea of what each. Now, again, each unit can do. There's a few other things probably that they can do, right? We all do military free fall for infiltration and different things like that. So there's a lot of carryover, but that's just strictly right doctrine-based mission sets. Okay, so now that we know all that, let's talk about the successes in the global war on terror. Okay, for each unit. Right. So I'm going to show you guys another clip, and we're going to talk about what was said in that because I think it's actually, really interesting. Let's check it out.
But I'm kind of biased. I respect the SEALs for what they do, but when it comes to being overseas doing stuff, there's only one unit that outshines Navy SEALs, Green Berets, and Delta Force, all those units. It's the Army Rangers. We're the only unit that's killed and captured more enemy targets, been consecutively deployed the entire duration of the global war on terrorism, no days off. There was never a time a Ranger was not over there. And I'm probably going to piss some SEALs off with it, but no SEAL has ever had to rescue us. Every single time a SEAL has been behind enemy lines and needed some help, they call us to come get them.
All right, a lot of bold statements there. We're going to talk about how much reality there is to them. Okay, but yeah, it's interesting. Now, I will say he had me in the first half, that meme, right? Comparing himself to, comparing Rangers to Navy SEALs. Yeah, for sure. Rangers have been actively deployed and fighting the global war on terror. They can't even compare the two when it comes to actually amount of work being done. The problem is when you try to throw in Army Special Forces and Delta Force into the mix there, then it becomes a little and we'll talk about why. All right, so like he says there, Ranger Battalion is the only unit that has been constantly overseas or deployed overseas doing stuff. Okay, and then it says Green Berets right after that. Unfortunately, Green Berets are the only military unit that have actually been overseas, constantly deployed, doing stuff for longer than the Rangers. Okay, and trust me when I say this, who were the first Army boots on the ground or military boots on the ground outside the CIA into Afghanistan? 5th Group, right? 595, triple nickel, and trust me, 5th Group will never let you forget that they were the first on scene. Okay, so, and with that, Green Berets have been, Afghanistan was our war. We were pretty much in the entire country for the entire 20 years of it. Okay, doing things that Ranger Battalion was not doing a lot of the time. We'll talk about that in a second. We were there the longest, okay, and we were actively deployed there the entire time as well as Iraq and in Syria. Okay, Ranger Battalion was. Now, we're playing like, it's a little like ridiculous to even compare the two, because if you take Army Special Forces and Army Rangers and compare them to everyone else, both units were there way more than everyone else. Okay, so we're kind of playing a little bit of sticks and stones here with like who actually was there longer. I mean, yeah, SF by a little bit. Okay, if he wouldn't have had Green Berets in there after the comment, he would have had it, because yes, they actually were there. When you talk about just constantly being there for the entire time, yeah, more than Delta Force, right? Delta Force is a really small unit. They're used for surgical tasks. Okay, so he says some things in here that also aren't true. Okay, Ranger Battalion having the most kills in combat, that's not true. Okay, people think, oh, Rangers or Delta Force, Navy SEALs, Green Berets, who's got the most? The Air Force. Anybody who's been to combat knows who has all the KIA. It's the Air Force, okay? Because close air support is the king. It was the king global war on terror. Nobody comes close. Probably, if you really wanted to be like give it to a specific on the ground unit, it would be Air Force CCTs probably, because they have the most JTACs, right? So let's be careful there. Most captures, technically, that's what Ranger Battalion. I don't know the actual numbers. I don't know if anybody has them anywhere, but 275 does boast that as one of their biggest things, so we'll give that to them. But I mean, Army Special Forces does have some as well. My ODA in 2018 found the number 9 most wanted JPITL target on that targeting list. So both do anything, but yeah, we'll give that to Ranger Battalion. But yeah, I mean, it's a little bit, again, it's tough to compare because both Army Special Forces and Army Rangers were used way more than everybody. And when you talk about holistically over 20 years in Iraq, Afghanistan, and Syria, yes, both units worked their asses off and were always there. Okay, so, again, it is what it is, right? It's tough to like say one did more work. I don't think we can really say that, right? Because while Rangers, yeah, a lot of point target raids and things like that, Green Berets for, a good, huge portion of the war were doing VSO, actually like living out in villages for 6 to 12 months at a time, doing stuff nobody else was doing. That was when you talk about working hard, right? So again, both units worked their asses off, and I would say more so than any other unit. Now, compared to like Ranger Battalion to SEALs, which I've actually had that video asked to do a lot as well, which I might do that one instead, because I think they're easier to compare. Yeah, Rangers did a little bit more work than SEALs in that regard. Okay, now Let's talk about who's actually better. Let's get down to the nuts and bolts of it, right? That was a lot of background. Again, probably a little bit longer of a video, but I wanted you guys to have a good understanding of start to finish, mission sets, what we actually do. Okay, so it's easier to understand when you talk about who did better at what, right? So let's jump into it. All right, we're gonna look at a few different things. All right, some that we both do. So we're gonna talk about difficulty of the Q courses, direct action, counterterrorism, personnel-esque type recoveries, like the three we mentioned before, strategic level effectiveness. So a bunch of different things, okay? And then talk about who's better. Okay, so first, we're going to start at the beginning, okay? Difficulty of Q course selection and the amount of training each unit gets, okay? This one, obviously going to go to Green Berets, Army Special Forces. We have one of the longest Q courses in the military. We are, close to, when you put us right up next to probably Air Force PJs, the most trained in the qualification course units out there, okay? So it isn't really a competition in that one. Okay, next, this one we're going to talk about is what both units primarily did in the Global War on Terror, and that is direct action. The cool guy one, tactical, combat, right? Who is actually better, Army Special Forces or Army Rangers? That is going to go to Army Rangers, okay? And before my SF buddies get pissed off at me, which they won't because they'll probably agree, the reality is there's only 12 Green Berets, okay? And our fighting force is however good the Afghans or the Iraqis or the Syrians on the ground are, okay? We're extremely limited by the proficiency of the people we're leading in combat, okay? So me personally, if I had to take down some huge compound, right, I needed 100 soldiers to do it. Would I want to send 12 Green Berets with 80 Iraqis or Afghans, or would I want to send 100 Rangers? I'm sending 100 Rangers 10 out of 10 times. That's just the reality, okay? I would much rather have an entire couple companies of hitter American special operators than rely on, hopefully, 12 SF dudes to get the job done. Doesn't mean that we can't do direct action in special forces and we're not pretty good at it. We just don't have the capability to be anywhere near what Ranger Battalion does when it comes to conducting direct action. So, for the cool guy combat side, Ranger Battalion's going to get it, okay? Counterterrorism, right? This is an interesting one because we kind of do it in two different ways. And we have, each unit has the ability to sort of have successes where the others might not, okay? So, Ranger Battalion, like I mentioned on big, like kill capture, counterterrorism style missions, very, very successful at that. And again, I would much rather send in Rangers to do that type of mission. But what Green Berets can do for counterterrorism is by running our own intel, our sources, working with so closely with our partner force, having access to information, we're allowed to potentially hit targets that we couldn't have got otherwise. Okay, so who's better here? It's actually going to be a tie because both units do it differently and they both do it super effectively. Okay. Next, we'll get into sort of the austere recoveries, okay? Hostage rescue, personnel recovery, going and saving people. All right, we talked about it beginning. Mission sets, both units have done both. Obviously, who's going to win this one? We talked about before. It's going to go to the Rangers, right? They do way more of it. They had more success with it in Global War on Terror, and they get called to do it more, okay? So, again, let's say you have Black Hawk Down's a good example of this, as bad as that one was. Let's say you have a downed helicopter, okay? Sending in an ODA of Green Berets, again, you got 12 dudes potentially with, a host nation force. Do you want them trying to hold off potentially a huge attack from the enemy, or do you want a company of Rangers to do it, right? Truth is, kind of like direct action, you're going to want the company of Rangers to do it. All right, and the next one, strategic level effectiveness. Okay, so strategic level effectiveness is like actually carrying out successes at the strategic level. All right, the tactical level, the ground floor level, and the strategic level are not the same thing. Tactical level is I conduct point target raid on compound to capture so and so. Strategic level is right potentially Green Beret level, like training entire host nation force to potentially let them leverage and take an entire region in Afghanistan or province and hold it on their own. Okay, sort of the difference. So for actual strategic level effectiveness, that's going to go to Green Berets. All right, we again, we are working at, especially with foreign internal defense, right, and things like that, or counterinsurgency. This is large-scale, nationwide objectives that Green Berets are oftentimes working on, which is not necessarily the case for Rangers because, again, that's not part of their mission set. So, who's actually better? Well, as you can see, then reality is we don't operate the same. Our mission sets, you know, there's some bleed over, but they're not the same. So who's actually better? I'm going to say it's actually a tie. Now, that's not a cop-out. The reality is both units are probably the two most, when you talk about what we do, probably the two most successful military units over the last 20 years, side by side. And it's just the way it is. Okay, so it's very hard to say one's better than the other because they're different, right? Now, what we should probably do is talk about which one should you join, right? So if they're both awesome units and they're both super successful, how do you choose which one to choose or which one you want to try out for? Okay, I get this question asked all the time, and here's how I break it down. Okay, I look at it kind of by age, life experience, maturity. If you are 18, 17, 18, 19 years old, and you want to go to special operations, you need to go to Ranger Battalion. Get yourself an option 40 contract. Start your career there. Right? It's a much younger demographic in Ranger Battalion, and that's fine. Okay. Than it is in Army Special Forces. All right. The average age of a Green Beret is 33 years old. If you are 21, 22 years old trying to go through the Special Forces qualification course, your chance of success is extremely, extremely low. Okay. That's the reality of it. It is a little bit of an older man's game over there. Okay. So now, if you're in your mid-20s, right, you already got a master's degree, you're coming back off of a professional career, you want to serve your country, I suggest you go to Army Special Forces. Okay, again, you're a little bit further along in life. I think you're going to have a lot more success there. The reality is, okay, and this is not to knock on Ranger Battalion, but Ranger Battalion is a great stepping stone for guys in their career path to the next echelons of unit that they want to join, okay? A huge portion of Delta Force is guys that come in from Ranger Battalion. There are also a ton of guys in Army Special Forces that have come in from Ranger Battalion, okay? So it's a great, I don't want to call it a feeder unit because that's not what it is, but Ranger Battalion develops some of the most successful soldiers in the military that go on to other echelons of special operations work. There's no doubt about that, okay? So that's sort of how I suggest you guys go about it. If you're looking at it, okay, you don't have to do it that way, right? If you want to be 28 years old and go to Ranger Battalion, okay, you can give that a shot. But typically, that's the best way, I think, to go about it, right? So, I think that's actually going to wrap this one up. I think what we potentially might do, if you guys want to see it, is I can actually do a video just like this, but we can compare and contrast Rangers to SEALs because there's way more similarities there. Yes, one has some water focus, one doesn't, but when you're talking about sort of the age demographic of the soldier, what guys want to do by going there, what the expectations are, what they do tactically, combat, there's way more similarities to Rangers and SEALs than there are sort of Rangers to Green Berets in that way. Because Green Berets are such a unique unit in general. But yeah, hope you guys found this interesting. If you're somebody that's going to get super emotionally upset about some things I said here, that's concerning because this has been a very positive video on both sides. So relax, right? People freak out in the comment section over videos like these. Again, you're not going to go wrong with any unit. I think probably the two best, yeah, maybe I'm biased because it's Army, but I think the two best special operations units that you can possibly join, Army Rangers and Green Berets. So that's going to do it for this one. And y'all take care. Have a good day.